In 1973, a police officer named Richard Davis was delivering pizzas in Detroit when three men tried to rob him at gunpoint. He survived. Barely. It happened again and again. After the third attempt on his life, Davis decided he needed something better than luck. He started testing a new material, one that almost no one had heard of. A fiber invented by a quiet chemist in a laboratory in Delaware. That material was Kevlar, and the chemist who invented it never received a single dollar in royalties. Her name was Stephanie Kwolek, and this is what they left out of the history books. Stephanie Louise Kwolek was born on July 31, 1923, in a small town outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Her parents were Polish immigrants, working class, practical people who believed in hard work above everything else. Her father was a naturalist, a man fascinated by the world around him. On weekends, he would take young Stephanie into the woods and teach her to observe, to look closely at things, to ask why. She was 6 years old when he died. Her mother raised her and her brother alone. Money was tight. Dreams had to be practical. Stephanie was brilliant in school, especially in science and math. She wanted to be a doctor. But medical school was expensive, and her mother had other ideas. So in 1946, at 22 years old, Stephanie Kwolek graduated from Carnegie Mellon University with a degree in chemistry. She needed money. Fast. She applied to DuPont, one of the largest chemical companies in the world, for a temporary job, just to save enough for medical school. At the end of the interview, the research director told her he would get back to her in a couple of weeks. Kwolek looked him in the eye and said she needed an answer sooner than that. He hired her on the spot. She never went to medical school. She spent the next 40 years at DuPont, and she never regretted it for a single day. In the 1960s, DuPont was racing to solve a problem. The world was running out of oil, and oil was the raw material for nylon, the synthetic fiber that DuPont had built its empire on. The company needed something lighter, stronger, something that could perform under extreme conditions. They gave the problem to their research team, including one of the few women chemists in the building, Stephanie Kwolek. In 1964, Kwolek was trying to dissolve a polymer, a long chain of molecules, into a liquid so it could be spun into fibers. The process normally produced a clear, thick liquid. Like molasses, what she got instead was something strange. The solution was thin, almost watery, and cloudy, like diluted milk. Every chemist in the lab told her to throw it away. A cloudy solution meant contamination. It meant failure. Kwolek refused. Something about that liquid held her attention. She couldn't explain why. It just felt different. She asked a technician named Charles Smullen to run it through the spinneret, the machine that spins liquid into fiber. He refused. He said the solution was too thin. It would clog the machine. It would never work. Kwolek persuaded him anyway. The results came back, and they were, in her own words, unbelievable. The fiber was incredibly strong, stronger than nylon, stronger than fiberglass, 5 times stronger than steel, at the same weight. Kwolek ran the test again, and again, and again. She needed to be sure, every time, the same result. She walked into her supervisor's office and told him what she had found. He understood immediately. Within days, the entire pioneering research laboratory at DuPont had been redirected. Every available chemist was assigned to study this new fiber. They called it Fiber B. The world would later know it as Kevlar. But here is where the story gets complicated. Kwolek had discovered something revolutionary, a material that would go on to generate billions of dollars in revenue for DuPont, a material used in over 200 products, from bulletproof vests to space shuttles, from fiber optic cables to bridges. And in 1986, When Stephanie Kwolek retired from DuPont after 40 years of service, she had not received a single dollar in royalties from Kevlar. DuPont owned the patents, not her. That was standard practice at the time. When you invented something on company time, the company owned it. Kwolek never complained publicly. She said she was proud of her work, that saving lives was its own reward. But the woman whose invention had generated several $billion for her employer retired on a standard company pension. The story of Kevlar saving lives almost didn't happen. It took 10 years, from Kwolek's discovery in 1965 to the first commercial bulletproof vest in 1975. The material had to be perfected, manufacturing processes had to be invented, and someone had to convince law enforcement to try something completely new. That someone was Richard Davis, the pizza delivery man who had survived 3 armed robberies. Davis founded a company called Second Chance Body Armor and started selling Kevlar vests directly to police officers out of the trunk of his car. To demonstrate that the vests actually worked, Davis did something remarkable. He shot himself, on camera, more than 190 times. He wore the vest, stood in front of a gun, and pulled the trigger himself. Police departments started buying. By the time Kwolek retired in 1986, Kevlar had already saved the lives of thousands of police officers. She sometimes received letters from officers whose lives had been saved by her invention. She kept every single one. A neighbor of hers was an FBI agent. Every so often, he would knock on her door and bring over a police officer or a soldier, someone who was alive because of Kevlar, to meet her. Kwolek would invite them in, offer them tea, and sit quietly while they thanked her for their lives. She never quite knew what to say. She once told an interviewer, "I don't think there's anything like saving someone's life to bring you satisfaction and happiness." There is one detail about Kevlar's history that almost no one knows. When other chemists began studying Kwolek's patents in the years after the discovery, one chemist at a rival company said, and I'm not making this up, he said, "The man who did the work in those patents had to be a very outstanding chemist." He assumed the inventor was a man, because Stephanie was not a very popular name at the time, and because in the 1960s, the idea of a woman making a discovery that important was simply unthinkable. Kwolek heard this story and found it amusing, not bitter, amusing. She had spent 40 years in a field dominated by men. She knew how the world worked, but she also knew what she had done. After retiring, Kwolek didn't stop. She tutored high school students. She mentored young women in science. She gave lectures. She wrote letters to students who reached out to her. She was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame in 1995. Only the 4th woman ever to receive that honor. She received the National Medal of Technology in 1996, awarded by the President of the United States. She won the Perkin Medal, the IRI Achievement Award, the Lemelson MIT Lifetime Achievement Award. And through all of it, she remained exactly the same. Quiet, precise, modest to the point of being almost invisible. By the time Stephanie Kwolek died on June 18, 2014, at the age of 90, Kevlar had been used in more than 200 applications. It was in bulletproof vests worn by soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan, in the helmets of firefighters, in the hulls of NASA spacecraft, in the cables that hold up suspension bridges, in the tires of Formula One race cars, and in the week of her death, the 1 millionth bulletproof vest made with Kevlar was sold. 1 million vests, each one a potential life saved, by a fiber invented by a woman who wanted to be a doctor, who took a temporary job to save money, and who ended up changing the world by refusing to throw away a cloudy solution that everyone else thought was garbage. When she was asked what advice she would give to young scientists, Kwolek said, "Don't be afraid to take a chance sometimes. Go out on a limb. That's where the fruit is." That is what they left out of the history books.